votes, more than 270, more than enough to become the 44th President of the United States. He will be the first African-American President of the United States.
I've been broke all my life, but I kept hope all them nights. You see business in my city? Yeah, they closed all them twice. I was just riding down Salem, all them damn potholes. I can't drive. I know y'all can fix it faster, but I know y'all won't try. Don't nobody care about us. And that's why I don't vote. Voted for Obama back in 2012. I remember that's when I had hope. He was saying, yes, we can. And everybody got less food stamps. And when I turned 21, I was still broke. I'd never vote again. I don't think I ever had a president make my life better. Did it all on my own. Ain't no politician ever do a nice gesture. I don't even know the mayor's name. I ain't never seen her one time ever. Tell me how she gonna help the city. What I'm supposed to do, write letters? What I'm supposed to do, blame Trump? He ain't never really gave a Ain't nobody raised minimum wage. None of these jobs pay enough. I think they just want to keep us broke, cause they ain't putting nothing in place for us. This how all my people feel, but we gotta learn. We complained enough, let me change it up. Everything I just said, everybody I know think the same way. See, they don't want to see us vote, and we never do, so we see the same thing. But all our votes really do count, and they'll never really let it show. So now I'm finna break it down, cause if I don't, probably never know. First thing first, you know back in middle school when they taught us it was 3 branches of the government. We forgot it when we got older. It's the judicial, the legislative, and executive. But all we know is the executive. That's the mayor or the governor and the president. Now none of them 3 people make no laws. They just be checking them. The laws come to their desk and all they do is say no or yes to it. So when the news station tried to tell us that Barack Obama couldn't put us on, we was all salty at Obama when it was the Congress members all along. We gotta focus on the legislative branch. Yeah, they the ones that make the laws. Yeah, they the ones write how much food stamp money you get on the card. But when people that wanted to help us wanted the job, I know they probably lost. Cause we ain't even know their name, we ain't know their face, we ain't know it all. So the Congress or the State House, that's legislative, they make laws. So what we want from the president is what they do. Okay, y'all? See, they election every 2 years, but we don't ever even go to those. The Congress, they can raise minimum wage, but we ain't even really know it though. So you know how back in 08, when we all voted for Obama, we was all supposed to go back in 2010 and vote for the Congress. Cause they the ones make child support laws. They the ones choose if your kids at school get to eat steak or corn dogs. The State House make the court costs. So if the country failed, then you can't say it's them, it's your fault. Cause y'all ain't know to vote for Congress members that was for y'all. And they don't gotta leave after 4 years, and we just let them sit. See, they don't wanna tell you this, they want you to focus on the president. Now the 3rd branch is the judicial, that's judges. They the reason why John Crawford and Trayvon ain't had justice. So when Meek Mill got locked up just for popping willies, we blame the judge and not the city when they let her get voted in, cause they ain't know who to vote against. Imagine life on the other side. Roads better, schools better, everybody get their license back, grocery store food better, custody of your kids back, homeless people get new shelters. If we gon' fix the U.S., we gotta start with them 2 letters, me and you. Somebody told us that the government wanna keep us broke, but the only reason why those people in the government is cause we ain't vote. And I ain't talking about the president, I'm talking about the ones we ain't know. See, they was gonna try to keep it low, but it's gonna hurt them when they see the pros.
Every time you stay home, someone is making a decision about you, making decisions about the air you breathe, the water you drink, the food your kids eat, and how much money you bring home every 2 weeks. So every time you sit out an election, every time you don't show up because you think it doesn't matter, someone else is happy that you didn't show up, so they can make that decision for you. Vote.
Good evening, and welcome to the Trinity Cme Church Ministry to Men's presentation regarding your rights as a citizen, your responsibilities as a citizen, and your obligations as a citizen. We will briefly touch on the following during this presentation: citizenship, right to vote, and the 3 branches of government. Curtis. First, let me give you a quick update on the current state of our government. As you guys know, we have recently sworn in a new president, President Joe R. Biden. His vice president is Vice President Kamala Harris. Curtis. There is a presidential line of succession that exists as it relates. And if something unfortunately were to happen to our president, be it impeachment, assassination, illness, or something that would render him unable to carry out his duties, we have listed the presidential line of succession. And of course, if there is any kind of significant catastrophe, then this succession could go very deep. Presently, the line of succession will show, of course, President Biden, his Vice President Kamala Harris. After her in the line of succession is the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. After Nancy Pelosi is the President Pro Tem of the Senate, Patrick Leahy. Many of you may have seen him on the impeachment hearings as of late. He was the gentleman that was conducting those hearings as the holding the office of the President Pro Tem of the Senate. After him comes the Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Defense, the Attorney General, the Secretary of Interior, the Secretary of Agriculture, the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of Labor, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Energy, Education, Veterans Affairs, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. You may see that we have many names that are listed here, but however, as we will talk about later, not all of these people have yet been confirmed by the Senate, and therefore they are, they are just the appointments that the president have made to those positions. And until the Congress confirms them, like they did just as recently as today, the Secretary of Energy, former Governor of Michigan, Jennifer Granholm, was confirmed in her post. Curtis. So what makes a citizen? To be a citizen of the United States, you must be born in the United States. That's one way to become a citizen. Another way to become a citizen is to be born to a U.S. citizen. And that you may be born to that U.S. citizen, that may be actually located in another jurisdiction, territory, or country. But if at the time that you were born to them, they were United States citizens, then you would become a United States citizen. And the third way to become a United States citizen is through the process called naturalization. And that is when someone decides to migrate to the United States and determines at that point in time that they want citizenship rights, and they want to become truly an American at that point. And there's some qualifications that you have to meet to get to naturalization. You must be 18 years old. You must be a permanent resident of at least 5 years. You can be a permanent resident of at least 3 years if you are married to a United States citizen. So you can shorten it in that instance. You have to be one of good moral character, have some knowledge of the Constitution and the laws of the United States, a basic understanding of the language of the country, and if you're successful in meeting all these qualifications and you pass your test, you will be required to take an oath of allegiance to the United States to make sure that you will defend and protect the Constitution and the United States of America. Curtis? So what are the duties of a citizen? You will see right off the bat, one of the main duties of a citizen is probably the least liked duty that we possess as citizens of the United States, of the state of Tennessee, of the county of Shelby, or of the city of Memphis. And that is a duty of citizens to pay taxes. The United States Congress raises money to fund the military, raises money to pay for services. For example, repairing the interstates and infrastructure throughout the country, making sure that entitlements are taken care of. For the song mentioned, food stamps, those kinds of entitlements or things that are paid for out of the taxes that are paid into the treasury. And those things are there to finance the functions and the duties of our federal government. On the state level, the states typically raise their money not through an income tax, however, but through a sales tax. Tennessee has one of the most what we call regressive sales tax in the country, in that we have a pretty high sales tax compared to most states. Now, you do have some states that have an income tax, but most states raise their money on the basis of a sales tax. And so we're required when we buy goods in our town or in our cities to make sure we pay those sales taxes that funding goes to help the state take care of its obligations, to repair its roads, to pay its money to education, to pay its money to the things that support state government and state government responsibilities. On the county and the local level, they raise their money through what we call the property tax. And you may hear that a lot of times if the police officers or the firemen need raises and there are other services and there are shortfalls on the budget of the city council or the Shelby County Commission, and they find that they're not able to make ends meet. They're not like the Congress of the United States where they can simply do deficit spending. They actually have to balance the budget. And sometimes it requires them, unfortunately, to raise property taxes. And they use those property taxes to pay for not just firemen and not just police, but education. They make sure they pay for schools and the things that are needed in our local schools. And so those taxes are fairly important. And so you can see by that explanation that that duty to pay taxes is an extensive duty that is required of us, yet it is a very necessary duty if we want the government to function and provide us the services that we request. The next is to obey laws. Now, this sounds very simple, but it's very pivotal. We need to understand that we need to have an orderly society. We can't have a society built off chaos and confusion. We must have order. And to be able to do that, we have to understand the laws and not understand what the laws are. We have to be law-abiding citizens. We have to obey the laws as they are set out. You may say, well, I didn't know that was a law. Well, if you go to court and you tell them you did not know, the judge is going to tell you quite simply, ignorance of the law is no defense. And so it behooves you as a citizen to not just simply know what the laws are, but you need to obey the law and ensure that we have an orderly society. One of the next duties, and as a lawyer, I look at this as the most important duty, and that is the duty of a citizen to serve on juries. Juries, as I mentioned earlier, we have to have a orderly society. We don't handle our disputes out in the street. We don't have vigilante justice and go and get someone that we accuse of a crime and beat them and hang them and do all of that. That's illegal and should be, although there's some historical basis where we have seen that happen in the past. But for the most part, we handle our disputes through the court. And we cannot handle our disputes through the court without citizens that are willing to serve on juries. Those that are faced with criminal charges have their liberty at stake. And because their liberty is at stake, they have a fundamental right under the Constitution to have, excuse me, I'm sorry, to have a trial by jury. They have a right to have a trial by the jury of their peers. And that jury cannot be discriminated to the point where you can exclude Blacks, women, or anybody on racist basis or sexist basis you have to be able to provide that person with a fair jury. In a civil case, you may find a situation where someone has been injured and the parties can determine whether or not that person was at fault, and if that person was at fault, how much responsibility that person owes. Well, we rely upon juries to make those determinations, to be able to orderly determine who wins and who loses in court, so that again, we have order. We don't have a chaotic society. To serve on the jury, typically, the judicial commissioner will select off of the voter registration rolls. They look at those rolls and they pick people to come down and get sworn in and join the potential jury pool, and they send you out to various courtrooms. But those courtrooms would not be effective. Those courtrooms would not work without your citizens' willingness to serve on juries. And so that is a most important duty. And I encourage you, when you have the opportunity, to serve in that capacity. Next, if you're a male between the ages of 18 and 25, you are to register for the selective service. And what this does is, if there's a conflict that comes up and our current state of military is not sufficient for the conflict, it allows Congress to reinstate the draft, and it allows the executive branch to start selecting men between those ages and bringing them in to the military to go to defend our country, which takes us to our final duty as a citizen, and that is our responsibility to defend our country. We live in the greatest country, not one of, we live in the greatest country of the world. And in living in the greatest country of the world, we've got to be willing to defend our democracy. We've got to be willing to defend our way of living. And we've got to be willing to defend against any kind of dangers, be it foreign or domestic. And so that is something we have got to understand, our responsibility as citizens. Curtis? Further, going into the responsibilities of a citizen. The first point under that responsibility is probably the biggest bullet you got in your gun, probably the most fundamental right you can have in society, probably the biggest right you can have, and that is the right to vote. Now, this right to vote is so precious that it has been very limitedly handed out over time. When our Constitution was first established and our country was first founded, the only people that could vote were white men that owned land. If you were not a white male and you didn't own any land, you did not have the right to vote. Ultimately, that was expanded to other white men who were citizens of the United States. They were given their rights to vote. But for everyone else, the right to vote has been something that had to be hard fought for to achieve, to get to. Women under the 19th Amendment achieved the right to vote in, I believe it was 1919. That's only 100 years ago. And so they fought very hard to achieve and get that right to vote. African Americans first received the right to vote after the Civil War. And then that right to vote was taken away through Jim Crow, through the Black Codes, through the White Citizen Councils, and all those kinds of obstacles that were thrown into the way of Black people to vote. And that happened up until the Voting Rights Act of 1865. And at that time, the Congress took away all those obstacles that were put in place during the Jim Crow era that kept Black people from voting, to ensure that Black people would have the opportunity to vote. Now, if you don't think that this opportunity or this right to vote is so important. You don't think that it's so fundamental. You don't think it's so, I mean, it's just, it's phenomenal. If you don't think that it is, if you sort of blah with regard to that, then I invite you to just this weekend do some research. Go on your computer and look at what's going on in state legislatures across the country. And you will find that most state legislators right now are trying to come up with obstacles that will keep people from having the right to vote, because they understand the power of the right to vote, and they understand that they cannot continue to hold on to power if new people continue to come into the voting process. And so I cannot impart upon you more strongly, the right to vote and your responsibilities as a citizen to engage in that right to vote. Next, you have a responsibility to participate in community activities. Many of us walk around and we look at our communities and we say, we look at the dangers that's going on. We look at the blight. We look at the trash. We look at the things that are going on in our community that we don't like, or in other communities that we pass through. And we go home and we talk about it inside of our walls. Yet there are community activists that are out there trying to make the community better, trying to make sure they got rid of blight, trying to make sure they get rid of crime, trying to make sure they make the community a better place for their family, your family, and the children to come. As a citizen, you have an absolute obligation to participate in these community activities. You must be involved. If you want to see your community grow, you want to see your community prosper, you want to see your community thrive, then it requires your participation. It requires your family's participation. It requires your friends' participation. But it starts with you, the citizen, to participate in these community activities, to make sure that our community is a better place. We need to respect the difference of opinions. That's very hard, I know, because sometimes people that don't think like you, sometimes people that don't have values like you, can say the darndest thing. They can say things that will make your blood boil. They can say things that will make you very angry. They can make you say things that would make you think that these people that are talking have got to be the stupidest people in the world. And sometimes we can react to those differences. But I come to tell you that we need to respect those differences of opinion. We need to respect everyone's right to have their opinion, whether we like it or not. We must understand that we can agree to disagree. While I disagree with your opinion, and I'm going to fight against what your beliefs are with every fiber of my body, I'm going to respect your right to have that opinion. And that's required for us to have an orderly society. Because if we lose respect for others' opinions, then we act on them. And when we act on those differences of opinion, we lose order. We lose dignity, and certainly we can lose respect. We must understand and respect those differences of opinion. I'm not telling you you need to give up yours, but respect someone else's right to have theirs and fight for yours as hard as you can. We need to respect the property, both public and private. All of us are aware of what just happened in the Congress on January the 6th. We saw a bunch of rioters go to the People's House, the United States Congress, and they destroyed public property. They destroyed the perception and the respect of the place. They were looking because they did not respect the difference of other opinions, looking to hurt and maim congressmen. They were totally disrespectful to the property. Now, I've got to tell you that I want us to understand we have an absolute right to protest. And we need to protest those we can't go into federal court. They have federal court. I did not. Can you not hear me? Mr. Dancy was calling me. Mr. Dancy, call Chantel at 736-3240 if there's an issue. 736-3240. Now,
Mr. Taylor, we can't hear you.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we have to have the respect for public property. Again, we can't go down. We have the right to protest, and we should protest, but we cannot do the things that would be disrespectful to public property while we do so. Likewise, we may not like what's going on with our neighbor and what the neighbor has in their yard. It may be the ugliest thing in the world, but we've got to respect their right to their privacy and their private property. Unless they're creating some type of nuisance that would injure, that would harm and affect you, then you need to respect their privacy and their property. Finally, the participation in government activities. Many of you that are on this call understand that the school board makes policy. The Shelby County Commission makes policy. The Memphis City Council makes policy. And when they make policy, they typically have it set up where people can come in and give their commentary. I'm encouraging you as in with regard to your right as a citizen to participate in government activities, to show up. Show up with your friends, show up with your family, show up with your groups that you're involved in, and participate and give your opinions as to what these government officials are proposing. If it's something that you are in favor of, let them know. If it's something that you're opposed to, and then let them know. And that gives me back to the first point of responsibilities of a citizen. If you reach out to your government, if you reach out to them and tell them that I don't want you to do this, and yet they still go forward with that process, then we go back to square one, and that is that power to vote. Because you can tell those people, you may not have listened to me then. I couldn't make you change that policy. I couldn't make you not pass that ordinance. I could not make you pass that bill. You went forward with it anyway over my objection. But what I can do, I can mobilize a group to come in and vote you out and put somebody in that will listen to me, that will carry forth the things that I feel are important in society. And so make sure as a responsibility of your citizens that you participate in these government activities. It is most crucial that you do so. Curtis? Now, we touched on this briefly a second ago, and that is how African Americans obtained their right to vote. When the United States Constitution was first established, African Americans were considered 3/5 of a person. And because you were 3/5 of a person, not even a whole person, citizenship rights were only to citizens, which were persons. And because we were not full persons, we did not have the right to vote. That did not come into play until the Emancipation Proclamation, which was signed on September the 22nd, 1862 by President Lincoln. And it stated that any person held as a slave in the rebellious states shall be ever free. Then on January 1st, 1863, it was changed to read that all persons held as slaves would be forever free. Now, that was the proclamation that was handed down by Abraham Lincoln. And that, of course, was the first step in achieving the right to vote, because at that stage, Black people were given certain citizenship rights. Well, that was sort of solidified. Well, that was solidified when the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution came and was passed, and it abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, except, of course, as punishment and crime. Now, you may have heard them talk about in the press executive orders. Well, the Emancipation Proclamation was but an executive order by President Lincoln. It was something that probably could have been overturned by the next president if he came in and decided that he didn't agree with President Lincoln. It didn't have the teeth that a law passed by the legislature would have. But the 13th Amendment had those teeth. And it came in because it was an amendment to the Constitution and it abolished slavery. And at that point, those teeth were those rights were given teeth. The 14th Amendment came afterward. And what the 14th Amendment did was it gave African Americans citizenship rights. And it says they're nullifying the Supreme Court's decision in Dred Scott versus Sanford. Dred Scott is a case where it was a test case, essentially, where a slave went to free territory. And when he got to the free territory, it was challenged that because he was now in free territory, whether or not he still could be considered a slave. Well, the Supreme Court sidestepped the issue altogether when Dred Scott was founded. And it went back to the Constitution and it said that Dred Scott did not have standing to pursue his case in the Supreme Court or in any court in the United States because he was 3/5 of a man and was not a citizen. Well, the 14th Amendment, when it was ratified, gave Americans that citizenship. Just one more step toward achieving the right to vote. And then the 15th Amendment was passed. And the 15th Amendment was passed that prohibited the federal government and the states from denying a citizen the right to vote based on race, color, and previous condition of servitude. It was ratified in the 1870s. I think it's interesting to note that these amendments that were passed during the period of time of Reconstruction. Reconstruction was, of course, the time that took place after slavery was ended and after the Civil War was ended. And so therefore, these amendments took place at that time, with the 15th Amendment doing in 1870. Well, Reconstruction ended in 1876. And at the time that Reconstruction ended, there was a deal that was essentially struck with the president and sympathizers of the South. And that was that the military, federal troops would be removed from the South, and that the South would be able to move forward and govern itself in accordance with its will. And while these amendments were passed, and while these rights were given to African Americans, moving them toward the right to vote, Jim Crow, Black codes, those things would come into play and would affect Black people's ability to vote for, of course, about the next 60 years. And it will be until the Voting Rights Act of 1865 that was passed when Black people truly had those obstacles taken away from them with regard to their ability to vote. Now, in the time that we're living, we're seeing those obstacles sort of creep back up. We're seeing them being brought back in by state legislatures all over the country. We saw in Georgia what our vote can mean. We saw how we can have a state that typically sends Republicans to the United States Senate, send 2 Democrats, because African Americans turned out in numbers. And now we're seeing Georgia and a number of states come up with things that they can do to block the right to vote. I cannot again stress to you again the importance of the right to vote. We have fought very hard to get it. We fought very hard to retain it. And now we're going to have to fight really hard to keep it. And so I want you to keep that in mind as you move forward. Curtis. We've talked about the importance of voting. We've talked about the president. We've talked about the importance of voting on the local level, the state level, the federal level, the impacts that we can make if we go out and go to the polls and do what we're supposed to do. The impact that it's going to have on the future voters, because they see that we're participating in the process. They see that we're not standing on the sideline saying that they're going to do whatever they want to do anyway. We're involved in that process. We're involved because we're voting. We're involved because we're registering people to vote. We're involved because we're taking people to the polls with us. Voting is very important. Curtis. So what does your vote do? Your destiny is determined by voting. If you don't vote, you don't have a voice. You can stand around and pound your fist on the table all you want. But the people that are voting are determining your destiny. If you want to control your destiny, you will vote. The representatives you vote for will pass laws by which we are governed. If you're not going to vote, understand there will be representatives, and understand those representatives will pass laws, and understand you are under those laws that they pass, and you're going to be governed by those laws. Why not have a voice in making sure that those people that are passing those laws know what you want done? The judges you vote for will enforce and interpret those laws for you. Trust me, I'm in court all the time. And if you don't think politics plays a role, then you're sadly mistaken. And it shouldn't play a role, but it does. It's important on the local level when these judges come up that you see what they're about, and that you make sure that you're putting people in the courthouse that are going to identify with your needs. So essentially, voting can determine your quality of life. Curtis. The 3 branches of government. We have the executive branch, we have the legislative branch, and we have the judiciary branch. Starting with the legislative branch. The legislative branch is set up by 2 chambers of Congress on the federal level. You have the House of Representatives, and you have the United States Senate. On the state level, you have the state legislature, and in the state legislature, you have the House, and you have the Tennessee State Senate. And what these legislative branches do is, of course, they make the laws. They make the laws, and typically, if you look up every July 1 of 2000, July 1st, you will see that a whole bunch of laws go on the books at that time, where they've changed things, new things are taking place, and all of that goes on in Tennessee. But on the federal level, you have those 2 chambers, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives is a body that is determined by population. The more people you have in your state, the more representatives you will be able to send to the United States Congress. To be a representative, you have to be 25 years old. You have to be a 7-year citizen of the United States, and you must be an inhabitant of the state. Sir, the House of Representatives has a unique power that the Senate does not have, and that is the power to appropriate. All bills raising revenue shall originate in the House. For example, we see right now that the COVID-19 bill is passing through Congress. And you may notice that it's not being debated in the United States Senate at this time. In fact, it's being debated in the House of Representatives and may even come for a vote tomorrow. And that is because it is an appropriation bill that is going to be sending money to the states to shore up schools for the pandemic, to give money for vaccinations, to give checks to families in need. Those kinds of appropriations arise out of the House of Representatives and is unique to the House of Representatives. The Senate is a more deliberative body by history, and they only send 2 senators per state. You have to be 30 years old to be a senator, 9-year citizen of the United States, an inhabitant of the state in which you reside. There are certain powers that the Senate has, of course, that the House don't have. The president may make appointments to the courts and other offices, but it's the Senate that confirms those appointments that are made by the president. And if the Senate does not confirm, then the president's appointments cannot be made. The Senate also confirms or ratifies any treaties that the president enters into with other countries. And so they have unique powers there. But Congress is a very powerful body. It has the power to lay and collect taxes, to borrow money on the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among states, to establish post offices, to raise and support the Army and the Navy. Those are unique, and just a whole lot of powers that are given to Congress by the United States Constitution. But let me talk about this power of commerce, to regulate commerce, and why it's important to us. Because in the 1800s, after the amendments had been passed, certain civil rights acts were passed by Congress. And when those acts were trying to be implemented, the Supreme Court said that you were not going to be able to implement those things because you get into privacy rights of individuals and you get into privacy rights of states. And so the United States Congress could not do that. Well, in 1964, the Civil Rights Act was passed, and it eliminated public discrimination in public accommodations, amongst others. And you had the Fair Housing Act that ended up being passed. And those same arguments that were made in the 1800s were made in the 1960s after those acts were passed. And the courts found that the Congress could do that because of the broad power of their ability to regulate commerce. That was crucial. That was pivotal in making sure that the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Fair Housing Act, and subsequent civil rights legislation was effective because of the Congress's ability to regulate commerce. Curtis? Oh, no, Curtis, I'm sorry. We're staying. The executive branch is led by the President of the United States. To be President of the United States, well, first of all, the executive branch is to execute the laws. That is their responsibility. They don't make the laws. They may suggest that Congress do some things and send proposals over to Congress, but Congress pass the laws. The president is there to execute the law. To become president, you must be a natural born citizen. You must be 35 years old. a 14-year resident of the United States. The president is selected by the Electoral College, and many of us understand that that's very controversial. The Electoral College is made, it's in each state, certainly, and each state has a body of electors. But what happens is, of course, every 4 years, we have a presidential election. And we go to the polls in each state, and we vote for the candidates of our choice. Most state legislatures have a rule that says whoever wins that state carries all the electoral votes for that state. So if you win by 1 vote, you get all the electoral votes for that state. And so once the election is held, then after the election is held, it's certified at the state level. The electors come together, they certify it, and after they certify it, they send a certificate to the President of the United States Senate. When they send it to the President of the United States Senate, the President of the United States Senate will bring the House of Representatives and the Senate together, and he will open the certificates that have been sent to him from the state, and he will count the votes. And the person with the most votes is the president. We just witnessed riots that took place because this process was in jeopardy. We had a president that didn't want to turn over power, and he didn't want to go forward with this process. But despite the riot, despite his actions, democracy won. The Constitution stood, and this process that's outlined to pick our president prevailed. And that is why we must be vigilant to be sure that we protect this Constitution and ensure this democracy won't fail, and do our duties as a citizen. So what are some of the duties of the president? Of course, he's the commander-in-chief of the military. He can send our troops out. He under the War Powers Resolution. He doesn't need an act of war to send our troops out to certain places of conflict. He can simply do that under the umbrella as commander-in-chief for a certain period of time. And if he leaves them there for after a period of time, then he has to go back to Congress and get some authorizations. The president has the right to make treaties with other countries, but those, again, treaties must be confirmed by 2/3 of the Senate. He has the ability to make appointments to ambassadorships, judges of the Supreme Court and other courts, and other offices of the United States. But again, those have to be confirmed by the United States. By the United States Senate. The president has the ability to veto bills that are sent his way by the legislative branch. If they send something to the president can say, no, I don't like this. I'm going to veto it and make you guys go back to the drawing board and do it again. Now, when he does that, the legislative branch has the power to say, oh, no, by a 2/3 majority vote in each house, the House and the Senate, we're going to overturn your veto, and now you're just going to be subject to what we pass. But he does have that check on the legislative branch, and they have that check on him. And that's what we call check and balances. And that is what's most important as we go forward and move forward through our process. Of the government, and no one gets too powerful. Finally, we have the judiciary, the Supreme Court of the United States, the United States Circuit Court of Appeals, the United States District Courts, the Tennessee Supreme Court, the Tennessee Court of Appeals, the Tennessee Criminal Court of Appeals, Tennessee Circuit Courts, Chancery Courts, General Session Courts. They are there to adjudicate the laws. They are there to look over and make sure things are the laws are being implemented fairly, and that they are constitutional. The Supreme Court of the United States jurisdiction is on all cases of law and equity arising under the Constitution laws of the United States, and treaties made. Cases where the United States is a party, cases between two or more states, states and citizens of another state, and between citizens of different states. So as you can see, the Supreme Court has a very wide jurisdiction in which to hear cases. The Supreme Court justices, the district court judges, the Court of Appeal judges are all lifetime appointments. And there's a reason for this. Because while the executive, the president is elected, while the congressmen are elected, they are political animals. But they didn't, the founders didn't want the courts to be a political animal. And so they gave them the protection of a lifetime term to say, you're not subjected to the politics of the day. We want you to look at the Constitution. We want you to look at the issue, and we want you to come up with the best decision, and you not have to worry about politics. You not have to worry about Democrats trying to vote you out, Republicans trying to vote you out, anybody trying to vote you out, because you have a lifetime term. And that's significant on the Supreme Court level, because over the years, we found that even, for example, well, I'll get to that in a second. But for years, we found that that to be a significant thing. On the state level, I must note that on the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals level and Court of Criminal Appeals level, we do vote on them. Now, we don't vote as they have opposition, but they're on the ballot as a retained vote or not to retain them. And so we have the ability every 8 years to make that decision for those in the state of Tennessee. Now, on the circuit level and the chancery level, these judges actually run against people or can run against people. And so you can have the opportunity to see what those people are about and determine who might be best for you, who might be best suited for you, and get to the polls and vote in those judicial elections. Because again, they're going to affect your life. You need to get involved. Now, I want to talk very briefly about something that came out of the Supreme Court, because we talked about the power of the legislature and the power of the presidency. But when the Supreme Court was first founded, it was not supposedly going to be this powerful body. But something happened in 1803 in a case called Marbury versus Madison. And I don't even remember what the facts of those cases were, because that's not what's important. Or that case was, because that's not what's important. What was important is the doctrine of judicial review came out of that case. And what that did was the Supreme Court said that we have the ability to determine whether or not the actions that you're engaging in are constitutional. And if not, we have the right to strike it down and call it null and void. In other words, we've got the last say as the Supreme Court. And so the judicial review option is something that's very important to us and should be important to us as Black people, because we have seen the evolution of our rights through this process of judicial review. You heard me mention Dred Scott earlier and how the court said that he had no standing because he was 3/5 of a person. But after the amendment to the Constitution that gave us citizenship rights, we had a case called Plessy versus Ferguson. And in that case, the United States Supreme Court found that, yeah, it's while the 14th Amendment says you can't discriminate based on color, race, if you make things, if you provide different services, but you do it equally, then it's okay. So at that point, the doctrine, but separate but equal, came alive. And that was a doctrine that was espoused in the case of Plessy versus Ferguson. And that was the law of the land for about 60 years. And then in the 1950s, 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, judicial review came again. And in this case, it was the Chief Justice Warren Court that was appointed by Republicans. They were supposed to be conservative. They were not supposed to be civil rights advocates. But they utilized their roles as Supreme Court justices and the role of judicial review to say separate but equal is not equal. It's inherently unequal. And therefore, they struck down the doctrine of separate but equal. And they said that you're going to have to integrate these schools, and you're going to have to do so with all deliberate speed. And so the doctrine of judicial review continues to be one that we rely upon in fighting out our battles in court and asking the Supreme Court to come in and handle and support our efforts as citizens of the United States to make sure that things that we're needing, that we're seeking, are being provided. Next slide, Curtis.
This is our government, this is our government, this is where we live. 3 parts of government: executive, judicial, legislative. The executive branch is the president's. The executive branch is the president's. Qualification for presidency: 35 years of age at least. A natural born citizen born here must reside in the States for 14 years. Now the function of the president, chief of state, head of government, reside in the White House, commander-in-chief of our military, our house, greet leaders of other nations, help create treaties and other negotiations. 4-year term, only allowed to, can sign a bill into law and veto bills too. The president's veto can be overturned by 2/3 of the Senate and the House of Representatives. This is our government, this is our government, this is where we live. 3 parts of government: executive, judicial, legislative. The legislative branch is made up of Congress, and they make the laws, regulate commerce, tax the people, borrow money, and declare the wars. The legislative branch has 2 parts: the Senate and the House of Representatives. Now the House of Representatives must live in the state they are representing, elected every 2 years to fill 435 seats. Must be a citizen for 7 years at least, 25 years of age. Number of reps depend on state's population. Now the Senate, at least 9 years, must be a citizen, live in the state they are representing, must be at least 36-year terms. Every 2 years, elect 1/3. The vice president is the president of the Senate, 100 senators, 2 per state. The vice president is the president of the Senate, 100 senators, 2 per state. This is our government, this is our government, this is where we live. 3 parts of government: executive, judicial, legislative. The judicial branch is made up of all courts. The highest court is the Supreme Court. It's on Congress to decide how many justices there should be. Now it's 9. The president chooses who will be the chief justices, and the Senate approves it. Once appointed justice, you are there till death or retirement. The Supreme Court is a guide for all courts in our country. Judicial review began in 1803, but that's not all. The Supreme Court has the final say in the law. This is our government. This is our government. This is where we live. 3 parts of government: executive, judicial, legislative. This is our government. This is our government. This is where we live. 3 parts of government: executive, judicial, legislative.
Okay, I want to again, my name is Chris Taylor. I am the chair of the Ministry of Men at Trinity Cme Church. I want to thank you all for participating tonight in our very brief presentation. We hope that you have learned something, or at least we hope we have stirred something in your conscience to make you look up something and with regard to curiosity. We thank you again for your attendance. We appreciate your being here. I am so very pleased to have seen you guys participate, and we will have this series going on at least once a month, reaching out. Again, we just want to thank you for your participation.
Great job, great job.
I will say that we had this on for an hour, and I think we achieved that goal. We did not have any things for question and Q&A because we wanted to be sure that we respected the time of those who participated. And so at this point in time, we will end the call, and thank you all for participating. And I'm glad you guys showed up.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to thank you for having made an excellent presentation with a lot of very important information that affects all of us greatly. So thank you again for your contribution.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for allowing me to do it.
Let's give him an applause, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, gang. We'll see y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good job, Chris. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay.